Welcome to the second day of HACR's Leadership Pipeline Program. Please welcome to the stage HACR's Vice President of Corporate Engagement and Programs, Alberto Ortega.
Buenos días, ¿cómo están? Wow, that's loud. Alberto Ortega, Vice President of Corporate Engagement and Programs. I hail from Chicago. I always do this. Who else is from Chicago? No sé, yo. Who's from Chicago? Órale. Ahí están, allá están, aquí estamos. Happy to have you. Welcome to day 2 of #HACRLPP. How are you all feeling today? Excited? This guy's working on his laptop. His head is down. He is grinding. Awesome. Atención, por favor. I want to welcome you to day 2. In just a couple of moments, we're going to have a series of impactful sessions ready to be kicked off for you by our very own rock star, Jai Vargas, Vice President of Strategic Engagement Initiatives. But before we get there, we're going to do some housekeeping. Reminder, headshots. You should have got your headshots today between 8 a.m. to 9 a.m. at no cost, right? That's on HACR as a courteous gift to you. Headshots will take place again, Plaza 1, 5th floor from 12 to 1 p.m. So if you haven't gotten your headshot, I encourage you to get one. I got one from 2019 and I still use it. And I actually had it taken here. Okay. Again, use the hashtag HACRLPP22. And on that note, I want to let you know that for the remainder of the day, you're going to be learning from Jai Vargas. A couple moments, you're going to hear from a very awesome Latina leader, Rocky, who's going to speak to rising to the top. How do you chart your success? You'll hear from our very own Sid Wilson, our CEO, on the importance of strategizing your leadership through board service. How do you maximize your exposure? And then towards the end of the day, we'll focus on topics relating to how to navigate corporate culture. How do we navigate? How do we move up? How do we not only get in, but how do we move up? On that note, I'm going to introduce to you our Vice President, Jai Vargas. Come to the stage, please.
Gracias, Alberto. Buenos dias. How are we today? So good, so good. It's so beautiful to see you all, especially since I saw you all out so late last night. I'm very impressed, actually. This conversation has everything to do with charting your success, navigating the corporate culture, and understanding how to pivot into your careers, whether it's a new industry, a new sector, understanding new skill sets. And we're going to hear from an executive that has been doing exactly this for quite some time. She has transitioned into multiple sectors, but always with a very clear storyline of giving back to the community. She is a philanthropic executive, an executive who happens to be part of HACR's legacy. You're going to get to know a little bit about Rocky Egusquiza, who's currently the executive director at the Latin GRAMMY Cultural Foundation. It's the philanthropic arm of the Latin Recording Academy. She's going to share her journey, what skill sets she's focused on, who her mentors were, how she has transitioned from nonprofit to sports and now entertainment and media. And we're gonna have a really great conversation with her. I want you to start thinking of questions that you can ask her so that she can help guide you. We received the question yesterday, how to transition into a new industry, or what skill sets do you need to focus on and hone in on to be able to do that seamlessly, if perhaps you don't have experience in the sports arena, in philanthropy and technology. And Rocky is going to help us understand just that. Before she became the executive director of the Latin GRAMMY Cultural Foundation, she was actually the chief diversity officer at the Miami Marlins Foundation. She made sure that through her work in diversity, equity, and inclusion, not just the staff, but the players and the community were absolutely connected to giving back. She has an incredible legacy that she is leaving behind, making sure that people understand that when you come into abundance, you have to show gratitude. And for us as Latinos, it's important to show gratitude by giving back to the community. We have that very much ingrained in our culture and traditions because we always send money back to our home, support our family in some way. But she's going to talk to us a little bit about how she's doing work right here in Miami, where she lives, and how she's done that for the Miami Marlins and how she's doing that now for the Latin Grammys. I would love to welcome to the stage Rocky Egusquiza, who is the Executive Director at the Latin GRAMMY Foundation. Rocky? Thank you for being here.
Thank you for inviting me. HACR is very special in my heart. I've been involved with the organization. I think I might have been in the first young Hispanic corporate achievers class.
Oh my goodness.
I have worked at a number of different, thank you. I've worked at a number of different companies and organizations, and at every one of them tried to support HACR and its programs. Had the opportunity when I was at Ford Motor Company and also at ARP to be part of the founding of the Corporate Executive Forum for HACR, as well as what today is the Latino Corporate Directors Association. Mm-hmm. Again, always trying to ensure that we're elevating our Latino leaders, our Latino corporate executives, and as you mentioned, aligning all of the work I've done to community, philanthropy, and purpose.
I love that. Take us back to where you began your career. Talk to us a little bit about what you studied, how you focused on building such a legacy of philanthropy and giving back to the community, and all of the various sectors that you've worked within, especially such different industries.
Well, I actually started my career in politics. And I know the two things you're not supposed to talk about is, one of the things is politics, right? And particularly, unfortunately, in today's society, it's become more of a divisive conversation instead of a unifying conversation. But I really had an incredible foundation beginning my career in politics because, I had studied political science in school, very young out of college, thought I was going to change the world. Still trying to.
You are.
But I learned a lot through politics at a young age, and I worked in the state senate. I worked in the county commission. I did constituent services and casework. I worked with elected officials, and I think that was probably the first place where I learned the impact and value of a team really working towards a common cause together. No better feeling than when you're on a campaign and you're all working because you believe in this candidate and what they stand for, and they win. But more importantly, the relationships I built throughout that process that I still keep in touch with today. Regardless of your party affiliation, I think a pivotal moment for me very young in my career was I actually went to Miami-Dade College before going to University of Miami. And in Miami-Dade College, I was 17 years old, and I had the opportunity to meet Ronald Reagan, who was the president at the time. And again, at 17, in full transparency, I knew nothing about politics. I would make fun of my brother, who was involved in politics, because he'd watch those news talk shows, and I'd be like, why aren't you at the beach? We live in Miami, But I went to this convocation that the college had, and I had an opportunity to meet the president. And what a pivotal moment of realizing that was such a big opportunity for the daughter of immigrant parents to have been in that same room to shake the hand of the president. I connected at that event with a couple of folks that were there, and I ultimately had the opportunity to do advance for Reagan Bush. Again, incredible to just be in that space, to be in that world. I was able to transition, that's what kind of inspired me to study political science, and I was able to transition from there, like I said. And I've had the opportunity to work for both Republicans and Democrats throughout my career. I haven't focused on one party. I've really focused on the individual, what they stand for, if they're advocating for the values I believe in and for our Latino community. And we're fortunate as Latinos that we have individuals in both parties that support our issues and our values. And I pivoted from working in government to becoming a lobbyist, because when you work in government, you think that's kind of what you want to do. I had the opportunity to do that with AT&T. I became their Vice President of Legislative Affairs for the state of Florida. Had an incredible opportunity, grew a lot, learned a lot, had a lot of challenges. It was at a time where here was this young Latina in Tallahassee lobbying, working with a lot of white men who were in the space. And so there were a lot of things I learned in that process. And I also became disillusioned, quite frankly, right? I had worked on the government side and, constituent services, helping people, changing the world, maybe it was still very young and blind to how a lot of the mechanisms and things worked, and then kind of flipping over to the lobbyist side and kind of seeing how some of these things worked in the background. I think I also realized it maybe wasn't where my passion lied, and it wasn't where I wanted to grow and focus my career. And so had the opportunity for a role at Ford Motor Company with Ford Motor Company Fund, which was an incredible experience. I mean, talk about a company that is committed to community,
Yes.
whose founder, started the middle class with a $5 work wage. Just incredible. And so I always say that I got my corporate social responsibility training at Ford Motor Company, and it couldn't have been a better hands-on education. Had the opportunity there to work really globally across communities, representing Ford, and because I was bilingual, I was living in Detroit, Michigan. I also had the opportunity to be a Hispanic spokesperson for the brand. I think throughout my career, the fact that I'm able to speak both languages has catapulted me and opened doors and opportunities I would not have otherwise had, and I'm beyond grateful to my parents for making sure that my brothers and I retained our language and spoke the language, and that's been invaluable to my career. I'm hoping to do that with my son today, because we have to kind of pass that on to the next generation. I had the opportunity from Ford to go to AARP and shifted a little bit, still with a focus on community, but shifted a little bit more to the diversity space. AARP had been an organization that had been successful focusing on the 50-year-old white men for their membership. And changing demographics, they really saw the opportunity for growth in their membership with diverse communities. And so Edna Kane Williams, who today is their Chief Diversity Officer, and I established the Multicultural Marketing Organization as really a center of excellence for diversity for the organization. We realized at that time, within the AARP structure, calling it multicultural marketing was something that the entire organization could put their arms around and would catapult the work we were doing quicker. So we didn't call it a chief diversity office, we called it a multicultural marketing office. And we really worked across every area of the business to educate and train those individuals about how diversity brought value to their goals within the organization. For diversity to be successful in any organization, it's got to be embedded within the culture and throughout the business units. Having a separate diversity office and expecting that diversity office to instill diversity in your organization is ultimately not going to be as successful as ensuring that every business unit within your organization or corporation understands the value of diversity to their business and has that as part of their individual goals. From AARP, I had the opportunity to go to NBC Universal. At NBC Universal, I became their Vice President of Community Affairs for NBC Universal Telemundo Enterprises. I helped create for Telemundo the El Poder en Ti campaign, franchise, program that still exists today, which is really, it's very powerful because the power is within each of us to really make that impact across whichever area, whether it's wellness, whether it's empowerment, whatever you're focusing on, it's really tapping into our individual power to do that. Had an incredible experience there. Had focused my entire career on my entire life on my career, and happy to say that later in life I met my life partner. I had my son at 47. So I tell people that it's either the definition of insanity. Look me up in the in Webster's. He's either gonna kill me or keep me young. I'm voting for the latter.
Me too.
But just a wonderful blessing, and I like to say, being a mother has only made me a better professional in my career. Only enhanced skill sets, patience definitely has been enhanced by being a mother. Multitasking to the nth degree. I, obviously always grateful to my parents for all the sacrifices they made for me, but understand them much more deeply and profoundly now that I have my own children. And also understand that much more deeply and profoundly the challenges that working mothers face in the workplace, right? I like to say I've always thought I'm a good manager. I've always been flexible with my employees. But I had no idea.
You had heard, but you've never experienced how difficult this could be.
And the reality is that until we experience it, it's hard to fully understand and fully support our teams, right? And whether it's motherhood, whether it's caring for a parent, as much as we try for life to sort of keep life and work separate, if we bring our whole selves to work, we bring all of that with us. And so, I've, throughout my career, like I'm sure many of you, have experienced, different challenges. My mother had Alzheimer's, and we had to care for her, managing, her care while being away. My career took me to different places. While my family was here in Miami, and I'm happy to be back home. I've lived in Detroit, I've lived in New York, Tallahassee, different places. And it felt like every time I came home to be with my mom, because I wasn't there every day, I could see the deterioration so much more deeply. And the impact that had, and obviously the feelings of guilt, quite honestly, right? Of balancing and managing, being there for her, who was my first mentor, had given up so much for me in her life and career, and maintaining my career. I jokingly tell folks, I remember when I interviewed for the role at NBC, I had the interview I was living in Washington, D.C. at the time, and had the interview there. And I talked so much about Miami because my mom had Alzheimer's, and was here, that the hiring manager who I was going to be reporting to, or who was the CEO of NBC Television Enterprise at the time, looked at me and he's like, "Rocky, the job's in New York, right?" Because I mentioned Miami so many times. And I said, yeah, no, I know the job's in New York, but I know NBC owns Telemundo. I know that I'll be working closely with Telemundo. Telemundo is based in Miami, so that'll take me to Miami. And you talk about mentors and folks in your career that really sponsors in your career. He was someone who made sure, I had never worked in the media industry, and I know one of the things we're going to talk about is kind of how your skills are transferable. I've had an incredible career across a number of different industries, but I'll never forget, you don't know what you don't know. And so I wasn't aware that in the media industry, typically at the end of each year, there's a lot of turnover that takes place. There's, downsizing, elimination of roles, but this is like a common practice almost annually. I had never experienced that in the roles I had prior to that. So one of the first things that he said to me when he gave me the role, he's like, "Okay, we're going to give you a contract." I'd never had a contract prior to that role, and I was like, "Oh no," and I'm of course naive, and I'm like, "Oh no, that's okay,
I don't need one.
Yeah, I don't need one. And he's like, no, you definitely need one. So he helped me navigate that process and made sure that I had a contract that was, favorable to me and to that pattern that occurred within media that I just didn't have a line of sight into. He also made sure, understanding how important it was for me to spend time with my mom, because I was honest and vocal about that on the front end. I think that's one thing that sometimes we're afraid, or we don't talk about the things we need when we are interviewing for roles. And I'm guilty of that as well. But I had a lot of intention in that interview. He also, and something I'm extremely grateful to for him, prior to his retirement, I was based in New York. He relocated me here to Miami.
To be close to your mom.
So I could be close to my mom.
That's
And my
incredible.
mom passed 6 months after that.
Oh, wow.
I'm gonna cry just thinking about it, but I'm forever grateful to him. And our organizations and companies can have incredible HR policies and things that protect us, but at the end of the day, it's the individuals that carry those out. And he was one of those sponsors that made sure that he carried those things out and sponsored me throughout my time there and prepared me throughout my time there to be successful.
I love that you speak so highly of people who've taken care of you, and the ability that you had to share something so personal with him. You kept mentioning Miami, you kept mentioning the challenges that you were having with your mom and making sure that you were spending time with her. If we have individuals in the room that are trying to figure out how to articulate the mental health challenges that we're facing, burnout, stress, caretaking needs, challenges with special needs children, what would you advise for them to do if this is not a new opportunity, but this is an existing relationship that they may have with their manager, and they have a fear of bringing up some of these instances because of what may happen to their role or how they may be perceived as not committed enough, can't stay late, doesn't understand the responsibility, has children, needs to go home? How can you?
I'll share my response through two other quick stories, because I think storytelling is really the best way to understand how these conversations take place. In a prior role to the one at NBC, I was in that situation, right? I went to my manager. I expressed the importance to me of spending time with my mom. Miami was one of the markets that the organization I was working with at the time had as a priority market. So coming to Miami for business was common. I at that time in my career was probably coming to Miami for business easily once a month. So I went to my manager with what I thought was a very fair proposal of, if more or less I'm traveling to Miami once a month on business, can I spend a week a month working from Miami, work remotely, minimal to no cost to the organization because I could stay with my mom in my parents' home. Would still do whatever projects we had to do here in Miami, but it would allow me that extra time with her. My manager at the time said yes, that I could do that. Now, the execution of that, the verbal yes to the execution of that, I didn't feel I had her support. To add insult to injury, my manager at the time was a Hispanic female, who I admired and who I thought if anybody was going to understand and support me, it would have been her. She said yes. I came to Miami on business. She came to Miami on business with me each of those trips. She made a schedule that was almost impossible
For you to see
for me to see my mom. And so I did that for a few months, and I think I then looked within the organization for other opportunities because I quickly realized I wasn't going to have the support I needed from this particular manager to really provide my mom the support she needed during this time. So I met with HR, I looked at other opportunities. I found an opportunity that was based in Florida that I was qualified for. The protocol in that particular organization was that your manager needed to approve any transfer. And so I talked to HR, I talked to the hiring manager for the role, I was their top candidate. The next step was speaking to my current manager to get that approval, which she did not give. She said that if I left my current position, it would be detrimental to the organization and that she couldn't approve that, et cetera. So I think for me, what I felt was I had exhausted, I loved the organization, I loved the company I was working at, I wanted to stay there, but I felt I had exhausted every avenue to be able to stay there and create an opportunity for myself that also aligned to my current personal reality. And so that's when I said I need to find something else, and that's when I started applying for other roles, and realized that I needed to go somewhere where it was clearly understood, right? And I think that's what empowered me, quite honestly, to some extent, when I had those interviews, to also be transparent about spending time in Miami being important for me. Another, I think, similar story is, remember I said in media, there's constant transition. So while I was on maternity leave, my role at NBC Universal was eliminated. And I have to tell you, if any of you are in those conversations in your career where you're looking at eliminating roles, wow, the psychological impact of eliminating a role to an employee who just had a child, I don't think anyone can understand that unless they've experienced it. Having focused on my career my entire life, I knew having a child would change my life. I never imagined that at the same time I would lose everything I had worked for so hard in my entire career. I went through the most difficult year of my life, and every time I went to an interview, and I was in the top 2 or I was a finalist, and I mentioned that I had a newborn, the tone in the room changed. All the questions that you mentioned about whether I could be dedicated, whether I would have the time, would I be able to travel, came into play. And I can't tell you how many interviews I went to where I felt that all of the skills that I had acquired in my career were perceived as having disappeared because I was now a mom. It was almost like being a mom had eliminated all of my skills. I can tell you that being a mom only enhances all of your skills.
Absolutely. Wow.
And so I'll never forget, and this is another sort of, I say in our lives, we have pivotal moments and like those aha moments. And I walked out of an interview. I was interviewing for a role based in Washington, D.C. I walked out of that interview, and a girlfriend called to check in on me. How did it go? What did they say? What happened? Did you like the company? And I said, oh, it went great. Everything was great until the end that I mentioned my son, and then kind of the tone in the room changed. And I almost had to hear myself say that out loud to understand what that meant. And it was like I stopped myself and I said, wow, did you hear what I just said? And she said, yes. And I said, why would I want to work somewhere that does not acknowledge the most important thing in my life? And it was that aha moment that shifted for me. Every other interview that I went to from that moment on, I think they thought I was insane, because I'd walk in and it'd be like, hi, I'm Rocky.
I have a son.
I have a 1-year-old son, or I have a 6-month-old son. Like, I was like,
Aw.
but I
love that.
something shifted in me where I realized I'm not being true to myself. and I'm not being honest with myself and what I need. And that might mean shifting and making some sacrifices and changing our career path or changing what we thought we wanted. By the way, it's okay that what we think we want changes throughout our career because life happens. And you know, I know I've talked a lot about mothers. I say the same for fathers. You know, the men in the room, those of you that are fathers, you know, I still don't understand why men get 2 weeks paternity and women get a longer time. They're as much your children as they are the children of you know, of our children. So,
and I wonder if men get that question often in interviews. Are you a parent? Can you travel? What are your responsibilities? Can you stay late? I'm sure we don't obviously hear that. And hopefully you are all getting ready to ask that question. And also tell us, the men in the room that have children, have you ever been asked about your responsibilities and commitments because you have children? Obviously, we know the answer, but it's such a shame.
And I think as whether you're a man or a woman in the workplace, right? How are you approaching those questions when you're hiring folks, right? And catch yourself. You know, listen, I'd be sitting here lying to you if I didn't tell you when I was younger in my career and I saw that some women that had children left early to pick up their kids, or that thoughts didn't cross my mind. Of course they did.
Of course.
I didn't know what I didn't know. You know, how are we educating even our younger managers about some of these things, right? And by the way, you don't have to have children. You have other responsibilities. You have parents, you have friends, whether you're married or not. You have friends you want to spend time with. You have, you know, what is that balance that you want in your life, and how are we as managers ensuring that for our employees and our team? Because if your employees have that balance and are happy, that's only going to make them better employees and better for the organization. I have to tell you, when I went to the Miami Marlins after, you know, having my son, 2 things that I thought were incredible. One, I interviewed with over 15 to 20 people for that role. I ended up with 2 roles in the organization over the time I was there. Initially, they hired me to be the executive director of the Miami Marlins Foundation. The role paid about 1/3 of what I was making in my job at NBC.
Wow. And then you ended up with 2 jobs.
I interviewed with 20 people with, hello, I'm Rocky, and I have a 6-month-old. And every single one of them embraced that, talked to me about their children or their grandchildren or their nephew or niece if they didn't have children, or the fact that they liked kids, whatever it was, right? Which really made me feel comfortable that that was a good next step for me. And I knew that the skills I had, I'd be able to not just transfer to the foundation, but I'd be able to support the team and the business side. I had the opportunity to, I don't know how many baseball fans are there in the room? Okay.
A lot.
So I had the incredible opportunity to report to our CEO at the time, which was Derek Jeter. So,
I'll sign up for that.
Who himself has kids, beautiful children, and was always extremely supportive. And you know, baseball is such a family-oriented sport. My son went to every single game from 6-month-old till now that he's 5.
That's so cool.
Had an incredible experience there, but also, right, was able in my role and in my role within the organization, reporting directly to the CEO, to influence other areas of the business. Obviously, diversity being one of them. Derek was the only African-American CEO of an MLB team, the only African-American owner of an MLB team. So that really meant that he was also someone that the Commissioner of Baseball looked to for advice on how to handle some diversity issues that the league was looking at. Because I was able to consult him and provide feedback and help provide some of the things that we were doing within the Marlins organization, that led to me being promoted like you said, ended up with 2 jobs. I ended up being the first vice president of diversity, equity, and inclusion for any MLB team. And then, thank you. And then retained my role at the foundation. And so, though I started making 1/3 of what I made, I was able to build my career there. I was able to grow my salary the time I was there. And I just had incredible opportunities to work not just here in South Florida as the communities team, but also across the league through networking with all the other MLB teams and really elevating diversity across the league. So incredible opportunity. Derek left our organization at the Marlins prior to the beginning of this last season. And I think that was just another time where it really made me think about what do I want to do next, and how do I continue to grow and influence. And the opportunity at the Latin GRAMMY Cultural Foundation came my way, and I think I was ready to kind of make an impact globally again, right? I had sort of worked, across the U.S. or globally in my other roles in corporate America, and at ARP, and so I felt, it's time. My son is now 5. I have this opportunity. So I'm really excited about my new role. I've been there for 2 weeks, so brand new.
Fantastic. Tell us a little bit about exactly what you do in your role. We've all seen the Latin Grammys, but what do you do behind the scenes?
So the Latin Grammys Cultural Foundation is the philanthropic arm of the Latin Grammy. So we focus on scholarships for music makers, for young musicians, Hispanic. We also give grants to preserve Latin culture through music. We want to make sure that we're capturing that story. When we think about music, right? Music is a unifier, brings families together. You talk about Latin music, right? My dad taught me how to dance salsa and merengue, and I can't think of a family gathering where there wasn't music or dancing. And so, that connection and that ability to really preserve that culture, for me is something that I value, and that being able to do that through my role is important. We do master series where we really want to make sure we're educating these young aspiring musicians about financial wealth, about the different jobs in the music industry. I used to say the same when I worked in baseball, and we had a lot of youth sports. A very small percentage of these kids are going to end up being professional baseball players. A very small percentage of them are going to end up being, Grammy-nominated musicians. But what they learn through the sport, what they learn through music, is going to prepare them to be professionals in life. And so we make sure that our Master Series program is really helping prepare these young people for a varied number of careers within the music industry, and understanding some of what we've been talking about today, that your skills are transferable. So if you don't make it in music, you can still make it in music and make it in life another way. It might not be as a singer. You might end up being a music teacher. You might end up opening a music business to help others create music and create their songs. And there's just a lot of different opportunities. So we have that master series. We're also very focused on more Latinas and more women within the music industry, and within and helping support them in their music careers. I think unfortunately in media and in the music industry, as in many industries, unfortunately still today, women continue to be underrepresented. And so that's something that we're also very focused in supporting young women, and giving them the tools they need to be successful. And even on the scholarship side, I say it's más que una beca. You're not only providing these kids a scholarship, you're providing them with the mentoring. You're giving them opportunities to be ambassadors. We're taking 11 of our scholarship recipients to the Latin Grammys this year.
Oh, wow.
where they're going to have opportunities to perform in different activities. Imagine the audience they're performing in front of. Imagine the connections they're making with executives in the music industry that they may not have had an opportunity to meet, right? And so we talk very much with them about really leveraging those opportunities to catapult their career. So I'm excited to continue to make an impact now in a different industry. And I know I've had kind of this eclectic career and moved across different industries, whether it was telecom with AT&T, aging with ARP, or baseball,
Sports, government,
media, government.
Nonprofit, my goodness. Tell us a little bit about what you think the running thread is when it comes to your skill set. What is it that you have that lands you these opportunities in almost any industry you applied for, it seemed?
So I would say a few things. I think for me, a common thread has always been the giving back and the diversity. I think those are two key things I've always focused on, and really the connection of community to the business, right? I think oftentimes every company's structured differently, but oftentimes community or corporate social responsibility, right, is the first thing that's eliminated in budgets, and that some organizations might not see that direct link. So I've always been able to link the community work to the business, whether it's how does it support human resources, and how are we providing scholarships and internships and creating that pipeline through that community contribution and sponsorship, but yet bringing these kids back to the organization for real job opportunities and creating that pipeline. Or if it's been, how are we looking at it from not just employment, but then how is it supporting the marketing side of the business, right? How are we speaking to young people where they're at in different areas of the business, right? So really looking at going back to even how we created at ARP, right? Going back to every area of the business, what are you trying to accomplish? And how does the community side of the business or diversity help you accomplish your goals? And if I'm an expert in the community and diversity space, I can't expect you to see that. I have to show you how you can do that. But if I show you that you can do that and it helps you meet your goal, then you're gonna be the champion to do that. And we can do that together. So I think that's been a key thing. And I would say, I like to see myself as a builder. I think in every organization I've been at, I've been able to go to that part of the business at a time and really build and grow it. And everyone, I think we need to know ourselves, right? Fortunately or unfortunately, and I was having this conversation with my own, I think we all create our own kind of personal board of directors and folks that we talk to be our sounding board and advise us. And as I was thinking of my transition from the Marlins, someone in my sounding board said, Rocky, why don't you pause? Why don't you wait? Why would you move on again? And I was interviewing for different roles, some in the diversity space, and that really just kept resounding in my head. And I was like, she almost made it sound like, you need to stop. Like, because every time I shift, I enter this new challenge, which is like insane, and trying to build and grow, and so she's like, and as I paused and really thought about this, I said, I have to embrace that what motivates me and what I'm passionate about is that building. When I get it to a point that it's running smoothly, I get bored. I get bored. And people tell me, you're insane. Enjoy that it's running smoothly, and take that time for yourself. And I can tell you, I've tried to do that. I've tried to do that time and time again.
What's the longest amount of time you've stayed with an organization?
8 years. So I've never jumped in a year, 2 years. I mean, all of my time with all the organizations I've been in have been, the least 4 years, the most 8 years. I've never just jumped for the sake of jumping. Because when you do build something and you build it correctly, it takes time.
Absolutely.
It takes time to do so, right?
In making all of those switches from industry to organization, did you ever have an executive coach, a career coach, a public speaking coach, anyone that was really guiding you?
So Yes and no. At times I've tapped in to coaches when I've needed them. I've brought that to my team members. I've worked a lot with, let's say, either Discovery Insights or Gallup Strengths Finder, and just really looked at my internal team at an organization, helping them understand that everyone brings different strengths to the table. All of us collectively are going to elevate the organization and the work we're doing. And with that, provided both coaching, follow-up coaching for my staff and myself. And that's been a very powerful tool. I have always invested in myself. I know sometimes, you know, we go to our organizations to invest, and, you know, kudos to all of you here, because I know many of your organizations are investing in you being here and having this opportunity. But not every organization is going to invest in your leadership development. And at the end of the day, it's not their responsibility. It's our responsibility. So I absolutely have gone to my organizations and said, you know, I think this is important for the next step in my career. And I've asked them if they would fund that training. And oftentimes they have, and it's been wonderful. But when they haven't, I've still paid for that. Because if I think it's important and they don't pay for it, I should still pay for it because it's my development. I'm going to take those skills with me wherever I go. And so that's been what I've done. You know, I've always first gone to my organization. I've asked, you know, would you consider investing, you know, whether it's coaching, whether it's a conference, whether it's a leadership training, a certification tied to my to what I'm doing in the business. And most of the time, I have gotten the support. I haven't gotten it always. And when I haven't gotten it, I've paid for it myself. And I've come back to my manager and shown them that I got the certification, that I did X, Y, Z, and shown them how it's helped the organization and the business. And that's also actually helped me when I've gone the next time with another ask, because they valued that I was willing to invest in myself as well.
I love that. And now we have some time for a few questions. I believe we have a virtual one.
That is correct. Here is a question from our virtual audience from Luis Mota from Johnson & Johnson. Why should anyone need their current manager's permission to take on a new opportunity?
So I don't think that you need your current mentor's permission to take a new opportunity. I think
But that was the protocol.
In the organization I was in, it was my current manager that had to approve the transfer within the organization. That organization saw it as valuable to the business for your manager to evaluate whether they could lose you. Again, not whether we agree with that or not, that was the policy that I had to follow. But in terms of your mentor, I think what your mentor serves as, and in that case it wasn't my mentor, it was my manager, but what your mentor serves as is really a sounding board for that next opportunity and getting their advice and what they think. But listen, I can tell you, even on in my personal board of directors today, everybody has a different opinion. Every single one. You know, I'll ask one and they'll say, you're crazy. I'll ask another one and they'll say, how exciting. I'll ask another, you know. At the end of the day, what you're doing is gathering information, but only you know what's the best decision for you and your career. And if anyone else thinks you're crazy, so what, you know? And as much as for me, I have moved, the other thing I'd love to tell all of you is, it's okay to be happy exactly where you're at. I think sometimes we also place a lot of pressure on ourselves of where we think we need to be. You know, I want to learn how to do that. I want to be able to coast and feel good about it. Haven't gotten there yet. I will get there one day. But there's nothing wrong with being there. Because again, that also ties to where you're at in your life. What are the other factors? And we're going to want different things at different times in our journey. And that's okay. Sometimes, you know, I can speak for myself. I know I've been hard on myself. And I know that I've had times where I've said, you know, no, I'm not being valued. I've got to move. There are, you know, looking back, there's times where maybe I did move too quickly. I don't have any regrets per se because I'm love the opportunities I've had. They've led to different things. I've had such varied experience I wouldn't have otherwise had. But there were times I moved too quickly, and times that if I would have been a little bit more patient, it was going to come. And I had mentors that told me that, Rocky, wait. But the organization just wasn't moving quick enough for me, and I needed more. Within all of those experiences are other lessons, right? And maybe the next time around I handled it a little differently. Maybe the next time around I waited a little longer. Maybe the next time, we're going to learn from all those experiences. But no, to answer the question, your mentor does not need to approve your moves. You're the only one that can decide your future. Your mentor provides advice. The story I shared was my manager, which was just that organizational structure.
Let's see, do we have any questions from the audience? If so, you can actually find my colleague, and they will walk the microphone. Perfect.
Hello, my name is Leo Marichal. I'm from Bank of America, and I love baseball. But your story resonated, right? And I think it's a two-part question, right? So the story that you said about the person that wouldn't approve your promotion, how did that change you, right, as a person? But more importantly, to find out that it was a Hispanic that actually kind of prevented that. How do we change that? I mean, what kind of impact that had? Because we would expect that. Well, I should be careful.
No,
we wouldn't expect it from one of us, and I don't mean that in any form. But how did that impact you, and how did that change your career and how you view?
Nice. I have to say, it heavily impacted me. It was a huge disappointment. And unfortunately, I've had 2 female Hispanic managers in my life that both disappointed me. And it was, how it impacted me is, you realize the only thing I can control is how I act, both in those situations and in the future when I'm in a position to promote someone, to hire someone, to give somebody the flexibility they need. How am I going to act? And so that's how I took that experience and catapulted into ensuring, I mean, like I said, I always have thought that I've done that. I'm even more vigilant about how I do that today. I've been in conversations. We just went through the pandemic. We unfortunately, during that time, many companies had to do downsizing during that time. And when I was in the room and had a seat at the table and had conversations about individuals that, were not being considered to be let go because of performance, but because of other issues, I made damn sure that I was protecting individuals, understanding what they were going through, understanding who they were, understanding, and that I was bringing that to the table because I was in a position of power where I could. And I was advocating for those people. So how it impacted me was that those experiences for me absolutely disillusioned me, absolutely. I catapulted that into what am I doing with my team? How am I training, educating, coaching my team about those situations and how they can handle them? And how am I making sure that I'm advocating for my people when I'm at the table and I can? And when others are saying, well, how about this and how about that? I'm bringing back front and center, well, how about this? That person is bringing all of this to the table and they speak Spanish. So we're able to utilize them in these other ways. And so I'm constantly like, how do I advocate for my people because I'm in a position that I can? And how am I doing that in the workplace? How am I doing that in the community? How am I doing that mentoring others and ensuring that they're doing that as well? But it profoundly impacted me, heavily impacted me. It impacted my relationships with those individuals. That's the other thing, that sometimes when you leave a job, that exit, I love that exit interview, right? Like, is anybody honest in that exit interview? Does anybody really say why they're leaving the job? You
I know I have.
But not everybody does, right?
I read a book report.
I've sat with human resources in different companies I've worked, right? And I've always said, like, are you asking the right questions? You know, we had a young man who, when I worked at the Marlins, who had relocated, came for a seasonal role, no guarantee of employment, was beyond committed to the organization, the exact type of employee that you want and commitment you want. And when that young man left the organization, he left for a better role, absolutely. But I remember sitting with HR and saying, absolutely he left for a better role. Why was he even looking? Mm-hmm. That is the question. Because when you're happy, there's always opportunities, guys. There's always other jobs out there. But when you're happy in your role, you're not even looking, right? So why did he start dating? Because he wasn't happy, right?
And they say you don't leave organizations, you leave people.
Absolutely, you leave people, right? So that's where you have to look at what happened. And are we asking the right questions in those exit interviews? I ultimately, you know, you say how it impacted me. I left that organization, which was unfortunate, was a phenomenal organization, but I knew I wasn't gonna go anywhere with the manager I had. I knew my manager wasn't going anywhere, so I decided to move on. And when I moved on, by the way, and I called my manager to say I was leaving to another role, shock. Total shock.
She was like, ¿Por qué?
Total shock. And I did have that honest conversation with her. And I said to her, this is why. And I was so disappointed in you, not just as a leader, but as a Latina leader who I looked up to, who I was excited to work for, that you knew my commitment to the organization. You knew that I could have done my job from anywhere. And that by the way, when you're given that flexibility, don't you work harder?
Absolutely.
Don't you make 150% sure that you are beyond dotting your I's and crossing your T's, because you know they're giving you that opportunity. So I was honest with her, but it tarnished my relationship with her to this day, unfortunately. But we learn from that, and you know, you can't change other people. You can only look at how you conduct yourself and how you're ensuring that in your role, you're not doing that, and that you're uplifting others, that you're providing opportunities to others. You know, you talk about helping Latinos in the workplace. When I worked at Ford Motor Company, every time we had a job opportunity and a job opening, I'd bring Latino candidates. And I remember my manager said to me, and I was in Detroit at the time, Rocky, do you know anyone who isn't Latino? I said, yeah, but you asked me to bring you the best candidates. The best candidates are Latinos.
Nice. I love that. I love that.
Leo, did I answer your question? Thank you.
Thank you for that. I want to thank you, Rocky, for being so incredibly open with us, for being transparent, for sharing with us how you've pivoted to so many different industries, always with the thread of giving back to the community and helping these organizations understand that we as a community have this within us, the ability to connect and give back, making sure that diversity is top of mind, but embedded within the organization, not just with the Office of Diversity and Inclusion. And I also want to thank you for your continued advocacy and support when a woman is in the room and sharing the fact that she may be expecting or that she has children, and more so a man as well, to be able to add that flexibility to someone who's caretaking for their parents, to give them the flexibility of time. Now that you've gone through those experiences, I feel like you've become a better person, and now you know how to respond when situations arise and someone is asking for flexibility from you. I want you all to add Rocky on LinkedIn. She's an incredible leader. She's right here in Miami. She knows Derek Jeter. And I hope that you come back. I know that you've been embedded within HACR for so many years, and we are so thankful.
I'm very grateful to HACR. I know Sid is somewhere in the room, but Love the organization, love the work the organization's doing. Kudos to all of you and your organizations for your continued support of HACR. It's programs like this, and it's the people you're meeting outside your organization and that network you're creating that will also lead to future opportunities for you in your careers. So make sure that beyond the sort of panels and that you're spending that time getting to know each other and creating those formal networks with each other as sounding boards to continue your growth in your journey and those conversations and how to deal with different things. There's no more value than doing that for each other and doing that together. If my email is rocky@grammy.com, email me, happy to touch base, happy to answer any questions. If
Can
you're
we go
ever
to the
in
Latin
Miami.
Grammys with you? I asked the hard questions.
You can come if you buy tickets. I'm happy to send you a sponsorship package.